Hi, I'm Dr. Ted Norris, and I'm here because of my effort and interest in gaining our control back and consent back to our government. A man who really has worked hard on that is Field McConnell. In what capacity? Tell them, the ladies and gentlemen, how you work in that capacity.
Well, early on, my background was I was an Air Force dependent. I grew up in an Air Force family. Both my parents served in the military. They're both now resting in Arlington National Cemetery. I graduated from the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis, Maryland in 1971. One of my college classmates, Captain Chick Burlingame from the class of 71, was the captain of American Flight 77, which is reported by the major media as having hit the Pentagon, which it did not. I flew for the airlines for 32 years, plural airlines, by the way, mostly Northwest Airlines for 29 years. I flew for a Muslim nation's national airline for a year and a half. And I've been on both sides of the flying events of 9/11 as an airline pilot for 30 years. I have a great deal of fluency, I believe, in the airline end of it. Also, I spent 16 years of my 26-year military career in the North American Air Defense Command, flying F-4 Phantoms and F-16s in air defense roles where I was paid to be ready to go with no notice, 24 hours a day, any kind of weather, and go out and find what might be threatening the continental United States. And it was my pleasure to do that. I enjoyed the job a great deal. But when 9/11 occurred, I was in a position of being an active airline pilot and a retired military interceptor pilot, and I just did not have a good feel about what we were being told about 9/11. And here it is 9 years later, and I have a much less pleasant feeling about what happened on 9/11.
Well, thank you. That's good, and I love your background, and I love your repentance from. And it didn't represent a change in your value, just a change in objectively what you were concluding about your world and what that's done for you and the rest of us in terms of your exposure of what seems pretty dastardly. We were talking in an earlier episode about the four modifications which were illegal and portend horrible things, and we got into that by talking about 9/11 and how it was used 8 times for the real planes and for the drones that replaced them. I asked you if there were other planes, and you mentioned the Airbus. Was it Airbus?
I mentioned Atom Air Flight 574.
Atom Air flights. That's
yes.
What it was. I knew there were a lot of A's like that.
There's a bunch of A's.
And that it was vaporized. Why do you think they wanted to vaporize that plane? Their planes are expensive, and people are more so.
Well, it depends. There's a group of people out there who are called depopulationists who would differ with you. They don't think there's any value to human life. Unfortunately, those people who are depopulationists, they also operate some very complex financial instruments, one of which is reinsurance. Reinsurance is simply if you were to put a $1 million life insurance policy on yourself payable to your daughter, and I'm the insurance company, as soon as I got that insurance policy, I wouldn't want to have to pay on something you're paying for, so I would take out a $10 million policy on you with another corporation or self-insurance through my own corporation, and that's called reinsurance. And that's reinsurance is a big part of the aviation safety. It's also a big part of 9/11. All these things that are insured, including specifically the life of my college classmate, Captain Chick Burlingame, Annapolis 71, his survivor, his daughter, Wendy Burlingame, was offered approximately $1.4 million if she'd turn over his death certificate. She would not do it. She died in an arson fire. This is a big game to these people who have no value of human life. They will gladly take down an airplane for reinsurance. And the airplanes that they take down can be prevented from this by cleansing them of these 4 illegal modifications. But when I say I don't want to be anything other than laser specific, in June of 2006, Boeing Corporation paid a $615 million claim settlement to the United States Department of Justice over the illegal modification of airliners and the illegal export of military hardware. And that's what happened to Atom Air 574 on the 1st of January of 07, which was approximately 20 days after I alerted the United States government, the Airline Pilots Association, and shortly thereafter the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and they collectively threw their hands up in the air. and people died, an Atom Air 574, and some in America, and I'm not speaking for Americans, but there are some in America, would collectively say, who cares? It's a bunch of Indonesians. Well, if that's the way we as Americans feel about Indonesians, that's what we should expect the Indonesians to feel about us. So do we care about what happened on 9/11? We certainly do. Therefore, should we not concern ourselves with what happened in Indonesia? We must. And that's why I've been active in trying to get these illegal modifications removed.
Why did the powers that be, and again, the nefarious powers that be, care about these Indonesians on that plane?
Well, at the very least, the powers that be within the United States are compelled to care about at least two of them. It's a man and a daughter from the United States of America. There were 2 Americans killed on an Atom Air 574. So regardless of the fact it was killed in Indonesian airspace, there's American victims. We have American agencies to investigate these things and make sure they don't happen in the future, or to find justice if there's been a crime committed. And it's my opinion that there was a big crime committed with Atom Air 574 on the 1st of January of 2007. And it was repeated on the 5th of May of 07 when a Kenyan airliner, and I want to point out that both of these airliners were Boeing 737s, of which 96 were illegally exported from Boeing to China. And we don't have time this year to talk about China, but that's a foot stomper. The second of the airliners of the Boeing 737 variety that went down, and I'm confident.
The Kenyan one.
The Kenyan one, yes. It was Kenya Airways Flight 507. It was on the 5th of May of 2007. And that airliner and the previous one, Atom Air, were both operating where there were Christians at one end and Muslims at the other. In the case of Kenya, they were operating where there was a British country at one end and French at the other. And this is classic Crown agent. I'm not sure if we're talking about Crown agents on this segment, but the Crown agents and the global bankers for hundreds of years have tried to pit one side against the other, thinking that each other's the enemy when the enemy is standing off making money. And that's the case in both the Indonesian incident, Atom Air 574, the Kenyan Flight 507.
So you think both of those were just for financial reasons and not for especially a lot of political reasons, or people that they wanted dead specifically? Or?
In the case of Kenya 507, there was somebody that England probably was well served when his pulse went to zero. And he was a writer, very high-profile writer in England that was talking about illegal exotic animal trafficking. But, I don't have time for that because I'm more interested in the illegal human trafficking that's going on with the same network, which is operating outside the reach of RICO.
Okay. Before we leave this subject, are there other reasons? How many planes do you think have fallen victim to these new innovations that have been illegally put on these planes?
I'll rattle off the ones that I'm aware of. American 77 on 9/11 at the Pentagon, American 11 at one of the World Trade Towers, United 175 up at the World Trade Center, United 93 over Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And when United 93 went down, one of the people from my old Air National Guard unit was within weapons employment range and visual observation. And it did not go down the way that we've been told it went down. And there was no heroics from a guy named Todd Beamer, bless his heart. I'm sure he would love to have done it. But this was all counterfeited. And in fact, rather than be vague and say it was counterfeited, both movies, United 93 and Flight 93, were vague attempts to steer the public away from the truth. And it's my obligation as an American who swore allegiance 4 times to the United States of America, I'm obligated to represent those people who've been victimized at the hands of a foreign power. A couple of other flights, we've talked about all 4 of the...
And the 4 drones, I guess.
And the 4 replacement drones. And if anyone wants to come up to date on the 4 drones and the 4 airliners from 9/11, simply go to www.captainsherlock.com. And there's a videotape called Captain Sherlock Solves 9/11. It's been out 3.5 years. If anybody wanted me to be silenced, they could have done it in 3.5 years. They either are being disrespectful towards me or they simply don't know what to do about us. And when I say us, there's more than 3,000 of us now. But in addition to the 4 drones, thank you for reminding me, the 4 airliners, there's also Atom Air 574. There's Kenya Airways 507. There's Air France 447. And that was the one that left Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, am I correct in this? And went to Paris and intended to go to Paris. But just like the one in Indonesia, when it got over the deepest portion of the ocean between the departure and the arrival airports, it had an incident that is rather unusual, resulting in the in-flight breakup of the aircraft structure and the death of everybody on board. And that can be easily read. There's a chapter 9 of a book at Captain Sherlock and Able Danger where we pretty much explain that from a technical standpoint about what could have happened and what probably did happen. But what did not happen was that flight didn't just happen to wander into some rough air and fall apart. And I say that on the basis of having 3,800 hours of flying in command of Airbus aircraft. And I know a great deal about that incident. And the fourth one, I would bring us back to the United States of America now in February of 2009. The flight number is Colgan 3407. The airport is Buffalo, New York. The alleged problem was icing. And the person on board they wanted silent was the widow of a man who died in the Trade Center. Her name was Beverly Eckert. She had spoken with President Obama 1 or 2 days prior about finding justice for the victims and the survivors of 9/11. She got on an airplane to go to Buffalo to honor her husband, deceased, Sean Eckert. That's not his name. Beverly Eckert is her name. Sean had a different last name, but you can Google him. When she went to Buffalo, she did not get there. The airplane came down in a very questionable circumstance, and she died. And I think we're just about ready to go to the end of this.
Wow. So just to silence her, or for vindictive reasons, or?
No, not vindictiveness, but she was relentless in her pursuit of truth and justice and closure for not only the survivors, but the souls of 9/11. And her next stop, when she left Buffalo, she was going to Chicago to talk to a federal prosecutor, and she was prevented from getting there.
Wow.
It's criminal.
It's really criminal. So I guess that pretty much ends this segment. Thank you for all your information.
Thank you for hosting us, Doctor.
Yeah.
If you liked this video, we have hundreds of more alternative videos ranging from sexual health to psychology to mind control. So if you liked it, go ahead and click on me to enter the Psyche Truth channel.